This video is sponsored by Ridge. More on them later. Hello and welcome to October, or as my people like to celebrate it as, Metroid Month, because Nintendo don't often create a new Metroid game, so you bet your sweet ass that we're going to celebrate every time they do so without making Samus talk too much, or, make the game mostly about the Federation. And, Metroid Dread could still end up being terrible, but I'm committed to this now, man! You can't stop me! I suppose it'll be a bit awkward if I'm still gleefully celebrating all the Metroid while Nintendo are busy fumbling Metroid Dread over the line, but I remain hopeful that Nintendo are capable of returning to form with one of their longest running franchises. So confident in fact that I'm starting Metroid Month off by looking at boss fights, because the way that things have gone over the last few decades may not have been entirely smooth, but generally Metroid nails its boss fights. It kinda has to, because exploration of alien worlds and spacecrafts is done so well that you need that other side of these games to be able to match up to that, and you can usually tell from the quality of boss fights which Metroid game it is that you're playing. And hey, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Other M's boss battles aren't so great, but talking about that game does make me feel uncomfortable sometimes. Almost as uncomfortable as sitting on a chunky leather wallet, but it might be encouraging to hear that I was once like you. I used to own a chunky leather wallet that made it look like my Brazilian butt lift had gone horribly wrong, but one day I saw the light and was saved by Ridge, who were kind enough to sponsor today's video with their incredibly sturdy wallets that are available in more than 30 colors and can hold up to 12 cards that you can now carry around in your front pocket with a bit of style. Plus, Ridge were also kind enough to send me their waterproof commuter backpack with a shock-resistant laptop holder, and their larger Weekender duffel bag, which both have an external USB port for on-the-go charging, and when the world stops being on fire, I'm gonna be using these a lot. Ridge comes with a lifetime warranty, so you can buy one wallet for the rest of your life if you so wish, with a 45-day return window for a free refund if you're not such a fan. Get 10% off today with free worldwide shipping and returns by going to ridge.com/RabbidLuigi and using the code RabbidLuigi. It's time to move your wallet into the future. Alrighty then, let's Metroid like never before. In all the excitement surrounding Metroid Dread, I feel like the general public, and me, have forgotten that Metroid has already had a pretty successful renaissance as recently as 2017. And hey, I know that sounds wild and kind of recent, but Metroid found new life when Nintendo invited Mercury Steam to come help develop Metroid Samus Returns for the 3DS. I sometimes forget about this game because of it coming so late into the 3DS's lifespan, but I shouldn't, because it's an impressive return to form that helped to pave the way for Dread, also co-developed by Mercury Steam. My one abiding memory of Samus Returns is a boss fight that comes towards the end of your adventures, and also out of nowhere, because you need to remember that this game is an officially sanctioned remake of Metroid 2, without those pesky fans getting there first, and at no point in the original was there an out-of-control digging machine that wants to crush Samus to death with its giant drill arms. Try and do that on the Game Boy. I'm taking the piss, but it is good that Mercury Steam were able to use the more powerful hardware to create something original for this remake that doesn't feel out of place. And it does have some pretty nice lore, because it was used by the Chozo as a digging machine to mine out the planet's core for a colony. But now it's gone rogue, and it just has that one red mechanical eyeball just glowing with evil. Couldn't you just use the non-evil digging machines? I know I said that my main lasting memory from Samus Returns was fighting Diggernaut, but that's only half the story, because I remember fighting Diggernaut for a long fucking time! I'm not sure if that's strictly true, or just a sign that boss fights in this game were generally pretty easy, and any sustained pushback from the game is now suddenly harder than Battletoads and Ninja Gaiden combined, but the easiest way to sum up Diggernaut is that he wasn't a walkover. As he should be, you fight him towards the end of the game with a vast array of tricks up your sleeves, and so it shouldn't be a surprise that this is a boss fight that demands a lot from you and doesn't give you an easy ride. Granted, its attack patterns aren't unfair or unpredictable, so it's merely a case of learning from your mistakes, and all the previous times you've died and dodging slightly better this time, but when everything clicks and you're able to seamlessly switch between abilities without a second thought, it's an unbelievable feeling. There's some similarities between Diggernaut and Emmy from Dread, mainly just the giant red eye, but if that eventual boss fight is half this satisfying, then we're in for a treat. Planning not to die as much, though. Damn, that Metroid sure is a spooky! Now that I think about it, I don't think Nintendo have had a franchise as scary as Metroid. maybe Luigi's Mansion at a push, and the creepier parts of Kirby if you want to think too hard about it. But with Metroid being inspired by Alien, you can definitely see a through current of creepiness and tense atmospheres. This comes into sharp focus when talking about Metroid Fusion's boss fights. They don't often have much build up to them, but then you've got Nightmare, whose shadow you can see fly by in the area preceding the fight, never mind how destroyed the area is now, which both help to ramp up the tension a couple of notches to somewhere altogether more terrifying. Note terrifying, because by the time you come face to weird melty face with Nightmare, Metroid Fusion temporarily drops pretty much all pretense of having a creepy ambience in favor of, oh shit, this thing's a bit weird, ain't it? What's this doing in a kid's game? Metroid Fusion is already pretty memorable in the boss fight department thanks to SAX and the numerous encounters that have a tendency to catch you out and catch you up, but I always preferred fighting Nightmare because of how quickly this fight goes off the rails. Yeah, I know SAX gets wild after a while, but Nightmare is so intensely memorable for how you melt its face with your arm cannon. Not the sort of thing I'd expect from a Metroid game, but you know, this game's already atypical as far as Metroid goes. This is just taking that idea and running with it to its natural, horrifying conclusion. Nightmare doesn't let you shoot its face off without a fight though, and can manipulate gravity so that you need to get really close in order to land your missiles, and it's quite hard to do that in the final form when he's flying towards you and you need to take some evasive action to stay alive. This thing's all sorts of memorable for being one of the most challenging Metroid fights around, but definitely for being one of the creepiest. I'm surprised that it gets new tricks the more damage you do to it. With a face like that, I'd want it over with as quick as possible. End me! Metroid is quite good at complete boss fights. By that I mean a boss fight where you don't just blast away at one weak spot for 5 minutes until a health bar stops having health in it. I mean those fights where you thoroughly trash a boss through multiple stages and forms, and considering that Samus is quite good at killing hostile aliens and has the weaponry to help her, it's no surprise at all how completely she destroys some enemies. It's a philosophy like this that helps to elevate a boss like Quadrax's, a fairly unremarkable if large security drone, to the level of a standout moment in the Prime trilogy, because you don't just shoot this thing a ton, you fucking annihilate it from the inside out. We've come a long way from spamming the same button at some tiny sprite who is apparently my boy Kraid. You know we can do better than that. The Prime trilogy was all about spectacle, because now these games are in 3D, suddenly everything's just a little bit more special. You explore an alien world and you go, ooh, and then you fight a big alien beastie and you go, ah. And considering that Metroid had to change genres somewhat to get here, it's a hell of a risk that paid off pretty massively in a way. I don't think you can do Quadraxis in a game that isn't in 3D. I'm sure there's a 16-bit demake of Prime 2 out there somewhere that gives it a good go, but 3D does absolute wonders with Quadraxis. As soon as you enter the room, you see this giant deactivated machine slumped over in the middle, and you just know that, oh yeah, this gonna be good. Initially, it isn't anything too exciting, since all you're doing is shooting away at some mechanical legs and mechanical knees, but Quadraxis keeps things interesting by being surprisingly mobile and having some very powerful attacks to keep you on your toes. The main event comes once you've trashed those legs enough for the head to leave them behind, and now we're in big boy territory, because you need to disrupt the signal being transmitted from the body to keep the head safe, and by gum, they found a way to use the Echo Visor in combat and give this battle a really unique visual style to it. Like, this looks really nice, and you're definitely going to remember it. Final form, and the head is a bit confused, but very aggressive, and so clearly what you need to do is to climb up onto it with your morph ball and drop a few bombs in there, which is only possible by riding up one of its busted legs and bomb jumping up there like something out of Pro Skater. Sometime after all of that, Quadraxis gets one hell of a headache and falls to the ground defeated, and my god, this is a boss fight that has just so much going on in it. You do so much damage on each form that you wouldn't be surprised if Quadraxis was done every time, but it keeps on kicking and you need to slap it down before it gets any bright ideas. Plus, your health slowly depletes throughout the whole fight since you're in the Dark World, and so there's some real tension going on here. Make sure you check that he's dead, you never know. It may feel like it's been a really long time since we've had a Metroid game in a home console, and it's been more than a decade, but it's worth remembering that the gap after Super Metroid was also quite long, and there's a variety of reasons why this was, but you'd have a hard time finding anyone who gives a shit because of what game came after. Like, you can create Metroid Prime and take all the time you want. Metroid Prime is so good that it makes me violent. I play it and all I want to do is go outside and punch something hard like a tree because, it's just so fucking good. You talk about difficult transitions to 3D like it's the game development equivalent of puberty, and then you've got Metroid Prime over here, the Giga Chad, making it all look so effortless. In reality, it wasn't. Nintendo put that 8 years of on and off dev time to good use and forged what 3D Metroid would look like over many years. It was a big moment, and you can't add another dimension without making sure that the boss fights are given special attention. Though, you need to remember that this game is chronologically set after the original Metroid, and so you're gonna have a hard time reusing the likes of Kraid and Mother Brain when they're dead, so I guess you have to make do with a cybernetically enhanced Ridley. Pour one out for my dead chunky boy. Meanwhile, Meta Ridley comes flying in from stage right looking for some shit to wreck and finds a plucky bounty hunter for his troubles. I can't pretend that this is the first time you see Meta Ridley in the game because he pops up earlier as a sneak preview of what's to come later, but he saves it all for opening night for frankly the boss that sells 3D Metroid for me. A more powerful console means that you can have a boss fight that exists on a grander scale like this, but even just having Ridley move along 3 separate axes and fly around the stage, making it a real challenge to keep a track of him and shoot for his exposed chest weak spot, that is so good! The way he flies by at rapid speed while dropping bombs or shooting fire out of his mouth gives him a real threat and a reason to keep him in your sights even when he's a small speck on the horizon. This all makes the second stage all the more striking as Ridley's wings burn away and force him to the ground, where you don't have to worry so much about where he's attacking from, but you do have to worry about all the Ridley that's in front of you now and how much damage it can do. It's just the perfect showcase for this new style of Metroid and a glowing endorsement of the switch to a more first-person shooter style of combat because, honestly, Ridley has never looked or played this well since. No pressure, eventual sequel. If you know anything about Metroid, then you probably know where this is going, and if you don't, then hey, you're gonna learn a lot this month. Metroid's always been a tad subtle with its narrative, of exposition being traded out for natural storytelling through exploring the environment around you, and this was a bit of a necessity with older games like Metroid 2 and Super Metroid that didn't really fancy grinding to a halt to weave yarns about how Ridley is a bad man, and you should punch him or something, I don't know. And yet, it's Super Metroid that comes out swinging with a boss fight that is driven by a very strong narrative that ends up making the end of the game one of the most iconic and memorable in gaming history. And that's from a game that came out when I was still swimming around in my dad's testicles. That's quite the feat. I'm sure you all know the story by now, especially if you played Other M, where it was basically the only thing that game ever cared about. Super Metroid is pretty much a story of Samus trying to find the baby Metroid that she rescued at the end of Metroid 2, and destroying most of a planet in order to find it. She doesn't, but she does find the usual space pirate gang like Ridley and Mother Brain and oh shit, look, it's Kraid! Love that guy. There's definitely going through the motion vibes towards the end as you defeat Mother Brain in an almost identical way to the other Metroid, but then... Dinosaurs? Dinosaurs? What? Yeah, Mother Brain has legs and little stubby arms now, and also this giant rainbow laser of death that only an intervention from a certain baby Metroid can solve. One dead baby later... Can't say that. And you've got a cathartic conclusion to a boss fight to enjoy as you fill Mother Brain with your own brand of Rainbow Death Laser, and every time I play through the end of Super Metroid, I get swept up in the theatre of it all. This is a boss fight with emotional weight, dripping in drama and plot twists aplenty, playing on previous experiences to toy with your expectations coupled with a swift punch to the gut, and it's all so good! Metroid doesn't often have boss fights that mean more than the sum of their parts, and yet, here we are. Maybe give us more of that in the now times? Part of me feels like Mother Brain is a cop-out because it's an obvious choice, but that doesn't mean it's a wrong one. If you've hit such a strong resonance with people for nearly 3 decades, then clearly you did something right. This is RabbidLuigi, and if you've enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more in the future, and be sure to check out this video about the worst movie tie-in games, and I also want to thank my top supporters on Patreon, including Jerome Sankara, The Green Scorpion, and Christopher Robinson. Thank you for watching, and never skip Chicken Leg Day.